Hello and welcome to the False Start Fantasy Podcast with your hosts, Cameron and Josh. We have a special guest this week on the show, Mr. Accountable. How are you doing, Kyler?
I am doing wonderful to be on this podcast with you.
That is so great to hear. And can you explain how you earned that nickname?
Um, I'm a really boring accountant that also went 181 points this week, so doing great.
Sounds super accountable, and you were just as consistent last week. That's correct, right?
Yeah, totally didn't do like 51 points, I think.
I see. So, Mr. Accountable with a very accountable team to go either 100 or 0. Josh, how are you doing?
A little tired, but other than that, I am doing fine.
Happy to hear that. Then we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. Announcements. Reminder again, we are on the brand new YouTube page, so please give us a like or comment any mailbag questions you have or comments for the future, and tell us about how our puns are the best puns you've ever heard. With that, we're going to go ahead and move on to the weekly matchups. And our first one here was a heartbreaker loss. Ethan coming back 143 to 140. Leonard Fournette and Cooper Kupp getting enough points in the Sunday and Monday night games to come back and get the win for Ethan. I'm sure you guys were just as devastated as I was with this loss for me, but I do want to hear Drake London 3.7 points. What are we doing with the Falcons offense? I'll throw it to you, Josh.
Especially for the next few weeks, I probably wouldn't pick up anyone from the offense. I mean, if you have Kyle Pitts, you're more or less forced to keep him at this point, but with Arthur Smith's willingness to just run the ball after Marcus Mariota makes a mistake, at this point, I just wouldn't touch the offense if I have a choice. Again, you can start them if you're in a pinch, but if you have the option, I wouldn't start them. Case in point, this last week, I believe it was Marcus Mariota threw the pick, and the next 14 plays were all run plays. So, not an easy offense to trust unless you have a running back.
Yeah, that's not great considering how bad their defense is, but I guess they did get to win. On the other side of this matchup, Kyler, talk to me about Leonard Fournette in that run game from the Bucks this week.
As a Cowboys fan, at the very first game, they ran all over us. Leonard Fournette is a big back and kind of just punishing. The more you hit him, the more you meet him in the hole, the better he gets throughout the game.
Yeah, problem though with the Bucks was they only put up 3 rushing yards in their game against the Chiefs. Are you thinking that that's just the Chiefs' run game is just that effective to stop, or is it the Bucks just gave up on it too quickly?
When first play is just absolutely dropping the ball on a kickoff, and then you just have to play from behind. You have to throw it. There's no way you can just run it.
Interesting. So we'll have to see what we do with running backs against the Chiefs. I know that Josh Jacobs has been on a bit of a tear recently, so may want to watch to see how he does against the Chiefs. He better get a good receiving floor like Leonard Fournette was luckily able to do to still put up a good number of points. But if that run game isn't there for teams against the Chiefs, we may have to start thinking of them differently. Moving on to our next matchup, we had Josh versus Billy. Josh with another win this week, moving on to second place in the league. Absolutely dominant performance. Josh, who are you worried? Are you worried about anybody on your team?
At the moment, not really. I have a lot of good depth pieces, so I just have to hope I choose the right guys any week.
Yeah, I did notice that you started Khalil Herbert this week. 11.1 points wasn't really the explosion that he had last week and just was able to carry fantasy managers with that 30-point week, but was still a decent game, 11.1. What are we doing with him in the future now that David Montgomery is just listed as questionable for next week?
He's definitely still a stash. If you have the option to pick him up, I still would. If you have a roster spot or you feel like you can drop someone for him, for me, I am personally keeping him just in case Montgomery does get hurt. There's always that good chance he re-aggravates that injury. I can't remember what his injury is right now off the top of my head, but in the event that he does, he is a very capable backup, and we saw it, I believe it was last week where he scored 30 something points. So if something were to happen to Montgomery, or even if the game script turns into more of a split backfield between the two, he might be able to get you a decent amount of points.
Very interesting. Then going on to the other side of the matchup, Kyler, talk to me about Matthew Stafford. What are we doing with this guy right now?
I was Billy and I had him, I'd be either putting him on the bench for a little bit until he figures out what he did to go to the Super Bowl, because at the first of the year last year, Matthew Stafford wasn't playing the best, but he was able to figure it out. So I'd put him on the bench and try to put in someone that's going to get you like a medium amount of points, uh, just to get you through it.
Well, then somebody, let me throw you this question then. Somebody who's been doing really well so far is Jared Goff. Would you be more interested in starting Jared Goff every week for the rest of the season or Matthew Stafford?
This last week, Jared Goff had a great game, but he was also playing against a defense that just couldn't figure anything out. He threw really well, but he also threw a couple picks in key situations. So I'd kind of wait, because I think Jared Goff is just going to be Jared Goff, and he's just going to fall off again.
Josh, how about your waiver weapon of last week? Geno Smith, is that somebody you would think to start every week over Matthew Stafford? Or is he just a little overperforming right now?
Until Stafford can prove otherwise, right now I would rather start Geno Smith. Um, Stafford's just looked awful. I'm not sure if it's the elbow. I'm not sure if it's age catching up to him. I'm not sure if it's just the Super Bowl hangover. At this point, I'm just not really sure. It could be O line issues as well. At this point, I'd rather have Geno. He's been performing a lot better against also equally difficult opponents. The short answer, yeah, I'd take Geno.
Yeah, Stafford QB 28 on the season right now. Jared Goff QB 5, Geno Smith QB 9 on the season. So need to keep an eye on what we do with the Matthew Stafford situation. I think right now you look to stream some quarterbacks in good matchups. You know, whoever's playing the Lions every week is a good person to play. Um, but yeah, you're gonna have to figure something out because that is just not what we're wanting to see from Stafford. Moving on, we're going to go on to the Bandon versus Brandon matchup. Bandon taking the dub with 142 points. Absolutely excellent there from his team. Really consistent. And Kittle was definitely down. But somebody I did want to highlight here, Kyler, tell me about Damian Harris. This guy put up 15.4 points. Yet I have heard that he has been dropped in plenty of leagues out there of people who are chasing the Ramondre Stevenson greatness instead. What are you thinking of Damian Harris so far?
I haven't been able to watch all these games, especially the Patriots, mainly because I just don't want to watch them. They have too many Super Bowls for my liking. But
Well,
with a quarterback going, with a quarterback going down, you always want to see your running backs get more touches. So I honestly would kind of keep him around. I think he will still continue to do well until Mac Jones possibly comes back.
sure. Let me read these numbers about Damian Harris to you then. 18 rushes for 86 yards and a touchdown, but he had one catch for -2 yards from Damian Harris. It's kind of what we're seeing from last year, where if this guy doesn't get a touchdown, he's not somebody you want to start because his catching floor is terrible. Josh, what are you doing with Damian Harris? RB 18 on the season right now in PPR.
Depending on your depth, I'd start him. If you kind of went for more of a zero RB draft style and you still have most of your people that you drafted, a good fit. He's almost guaranteed close to 10 points a week, so not too bad. Kind of like you mentioned, he doesn't have the pass catching upside, but he is the goal line back, so if New England does get close, he should get a touchdown event.
Yeah, on the other side of this matchup, Miles Sanders was absolutely incredible. 29.6 points from the running back there. Eagles just ran the ball and they would not stop running the ball. He's the RB9 on the season. Is this guy trending up, trending sideways? Is this what we expected from Miles Sanders? Josh, talk to me about what we're doing with this player.
So Miles Sanders, to me, he's a player you almost have to start. He's on a very good offense. I'm not exactly sure how the Eagles' offense ranks, but to me, they're at least a top three offense. You look at his stats from this last week: 134 rushing yards on only 27 attempts. So not the best, but still a lot of rushing yards and a lot of attempts, which is very promising. He also happened to get 2 touchdowns and some receiving work. So, well, I don't think they'll be in a script cut like what they were last week. And Jalen Hurts is always a threat to actually run it in when you get closer to the end zone. If he kind of shows some of this again, even if it's just one less touchdown, he's an easy start every single week.
Yeah, it seems right now like the Eagles, only one player on the team per week is actually going to be startable, but you have no idea who that player is going to be. But it looks like at least Miles Sanders has a good floor there. Same with A.J. Brown. Devonta Smith does worry me a little bit. Kyler, you're the biggest Eagles fan I know. I know that you just absolutely love that team. Tell me, how great is Jalen Hurts, and can he keep this team together moving forward?
As a Cowboys fan, I hate the Eagles, but Jalen Hurts is a really good quarterback. He is able to use his feet and able to throw the ball in key situations.
He throws
And
the ball with his feet.
shut up. He's able to use his feet to get into situations to create distance between his wide receivers and corners. And they're also having some fairly easy matchups coming up. Arizona, not that great against the run. The Cowboys, no matter how good our defense is, every time we face the Eagles, they run all over us. Pittsburgh, Houston, a lot of teams that just cannot contain the run, cannot contain well. So any Eagles player, I would honestly keep on starting coming up.
All right, well, and that brings us on to our next matchup. We had Chris versus Jaden. Chris finally getting his first dub. Everyone give that guy a round of applause, beating Jaden, who's 11th place. So happy for him to get his first win. Looking at that right there, we gotta first point out his biggest mistake. So at least it's feeling like it to him. Najee Harris, 7.4 points. That guy has just been an absolute bust so far on the season. Guys, what are we doing with Najee?
Considering where you drafted him, you almost have to start him. You know he's going to get some level of volume. However, I won't be confident and I definitely won't like it. It's basically taken like when you're younger and you had that really bitter medicine. It's basically that. You have to take the medicine, it's going to help you. This case, maybe not so much, but you still have to do it anyways. And literally, just because of where you had to draft him, if you can't trade him away, you almost have to start him.
Yeah, I'd say there's almost no market for him, though. The offensive line just keeps looking worse. Their upcoming schedule's terrible. I think Najee owners are really feeling the heat, and they're wondering if they should be benching him. Let me just tell you some of his matchups coming up, and it's not easy for the Steelers. So they play the Bills this week, then it's Tampa Bay next week, the Dolphins after that, then the Eagles before their bye week. I mean, if you're looking at waivers and you have a guy, let's say Naeem Hines, you know Jonathan Taylor's out, would you start Naeem Hines over Najee Harris? Kyler, I'll throw that one to you first.
Maybe. I, I still like to think of him as a really good running back, and with a new quarterback, he might see more touches. He might see different schemes trying to get his quarterback comfortable before actually letting him just try to be a gunslinger. So maybe they give him more touches, but I'd be trying to get rid of him.
How about you, Josh?
For now, I'd still start Najee, but just barely. Um, with a new quarterback coming in, I don't trust any piece of this offense. So for now, though, just barely, I would take Najee over.
Okay. Well, then looking at the other side of this matchup, big bust of the week for Jaden was Tony Pollard, 1.8 points. Put him into the RB1 spot just to make it a little bit worse, a little bit more dramatic for him there. Tony Pollard, a game 25 to 10 versus the Commies. What happened to Tony Pollard? Kyler, you're the big Cowboys expert here. What happened?
Honestly, I really don't know. Cowboys like to play Tony Pollard as their speed running back and Ezekiel Elliott as their power. So third and short, you're gonna see Zeke get the ball. But they just wouldn't hand him the ball, and any time that he actually did get a touch, he just wouldn't go anywhere. So to me, it was surprising. I'm glad the Cowboys won, but I'm sure Jaden's sitting there looking at that 1.8, either thinking about getting rid of him or what he's going to do next.
Yeah, we're 2 weeks removed from his almost 20-point game versus the Bengals. Josh, they're playing the Rams this week, who apparently are number one versus running backs right now. What are you considering benching Tony Pollard? Is he a guy you'd start this week?
Only out of necessity. If you have even a halfway decent running back on your bench still that's healthy, I would start him instead. But if you have to start him out of necessity, which I think Jaden almost has to, and you would, there's always the chance that he does catch some more passes. He typically catches more passes than Zeke, so we hope it's one of those games.
Last guy I wanted to highlight here was Matt Collins, 6.3 points. Raiders finally getting their first win versus the Broncos. I was hoping it would be a 3-3. They both tie, but I guess one team ended up having to win. Hunter Renfro's coming back. What are we doing with Matt Collins? Is he droppable, Josh?
I'm going to say no. He has shown that he has the skill to go off. However, I'm less likely to start him. Um, right now, the wide receiver landscape in our league's not looking the greatest. There's some good options, but it's not great either. So if you can spare it, maybe hold on and hope for an injury to Pro again or something like that. But otherwise, yeah, you could probably drop him.
Yeah, well, we have the waiver weapons on later in this show, so maybe that's a time that we can talk about dropping a guy like Matt Collins to pick one of those guys up if you need him. But we'll move on to our next matchup here: Sam versus Kyler. Kyler, 181 points. What the hell happened?
Honestly, I have no idea. I got extremely lucky. Players like TJ Hawkinson and Rashad Penny just had monster games against terrible defensive plays, and it just elevated 8 points.
Yeah, 21.1 points there from Justin Herbert, too, with the broken ribs. Feeling good about him in the future? Or was this just a bad defense from the Texans, and you're hoping that Justin Herbert will soon get healthier?
I think it was a little bit of both. I like Justin Herbert. He plays really well, plays really technical. But then Houston is Houston. You're going to score points on them. Unless you're the Colts.
Unless you're in the Colts, that's right. Well, the guy I did want to highlight here that you did mention, TJ Hawkinson on your team. Tell me, how has the experience been with TJ Hawkinson so far? Because with Amon-Ra St. Brown getting all the targets, have you been enjoying the Hawkinson experience?
I can tell you this game, I enjoyed it. Um, it opened up a receiver, and it had to have someone to throw the ball to and keep possessions. You're going to look for a tight end in that instance. So to see him actually get some points and actually do well, I'm riding this train until he comes back.
Yeah, the guy went 7.8, 5.6, 10.8 before this week. Josh, if you were a TJ Hawkinson owner, would you be kind of hoping that somebody would go tackle Amon-Ra St. Brown a little too extra hard in practice so you could keep this productivity up? Or is it something, okay, he had a couple of bad weeks, but he's going to get the ball again. He's going to be a big part of this offense in the future?
I think he still will be a key part of the offense. Probably nowhere near to this level again, but still a key part of it. As you mentioned before, he did have some weeks where he got 10 points, which to me is that threshold between a good tight end and a bad tight end on any given week. Unless you're one of those like top two, top three tight ends. Um, as for whether or not Amon Ra gets hit a little bit harder during practice, if this is the result of that, then yes, I would hope for that. But at the same time, hope people don't actually get hurt. So I hope someone on the other team hits him extra hard. He does come back.
Well, then the other side of this matchup was Dalvin Cook, 10.6 points. Right now, he's RB 25 on the season, despite playing all 4 games so far. What are we doing with Dalvin Cook? We talked a little bit about Najee Harris and how he was looking pretty poor. Dalvin Cook is definitely doing better than that. Is he a must start every week despite this bad beginning?
I'd say yes. He's still a really good running back. Where you drafted him again, kind of like similar with Najee, you almost have to start him just considering what you had to use to get him. Hopefully it does get better. The Vikings haven't had the easiest opponents so far, and they are still an okay offense. I wouldn't say they're great yet, but they might be able to figure things out because they do have a new offense. Right now, just hold on and hope he finally has one of his weeks.
Well, then I'll throw this hypothetical to you because Sam has this scenario right here. J.K. Dobbins is back from his injury, and this guy put up 22.3 points this week on a lot of people's benches for sure. Would you start him over Dalvin Cook? Let's say you're in a league where you're having James Robinson, who's been bursting out onto the scene. You got J.K. Dobbins too. Would you start, Robinson and Dobbins, or would you start Cook and Dobbins, Cook and Robinson? What would you do with those three? I'll throw this one to Kyler. Give you the hard decision first.
Um, Robinson, sorry, Robson, Robbins is playing really well. He's on a really good team that already runs the ball, even with their quarterback. That's no shade to Lamar. It's just he is a scrambling quarterback. I would still stay with Cook. I don't think Dobbins is gonna keep performing like that. I could easily be proven wrong with next week, but I'd stay with Cook.
Production is coming. I like it. Josh, you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd go Dobbins and Cook at least for this week.
Okay.
Kind of as like a test a week for Dobbins. Worst case scenario, you could always bench either one of them in favor of James Robinson, of course. But this week, I'd go for those two instead.
Very interesting. Well, that'll bring us to our last matchup here of the week: Marcus Mariota versus Mike Evans, and you see a 3.8 versus a 30.3. The quarterback position has definitely been a struggle for Preston's team. Malachi is feeling definitely very good having Mike Evans on the team. Kyler, tell me about Mike Evans. 30.3 points. That was a lot versus the Chiefs.
He's a great physical wide receiver. He's tall, he's big, he's strong, he's aggressive. Obviously, his suspension kind of proved the point. But no matter what, Tom Brady has to look to that outside edge on any goal line instance because you can throw a fade, back shoulder, and he's going to catch it. He's going to come down. Not very many cornerbacks are going to play that or physicality to break up that pass.
Yeah, Josh, big Chiefs fans here. Chiefs secondary is looking pretty terrible, and I think Mike Evans really proves that with the 30.3. Are you targeting the Chiefs as someone to play wide receivers against, given how bad that secondary has been so far?
If you have a QB on the caliber of Tom Brady and a wide receiver on the caliber of Mike Evans, then yes. So far, it seems like it's been those kind of bigger body, more physical wide receivers that hurt the Chiefs most. If you have a receiver like that, yes, target the Chiefs.
Well, on the other side of this matchup, Marcus Mariota was considered a good streaming option, somebody that hopefully his rushing floor would give you a good person to start each week. 3.86. Josh, what are we doing with Marcus Mariota? There's got to be better options on waivers. This is a complete bust right there on the starting.
Yeah, no, I'd cut him right now if I had him. Um, he's not good. He does provide you a rushing floor sometimes, but this last week, kind of like I mentioned earlier when we were talking about Drake London, He threw an interception, and his coach was like, "Okay, we're just going to run the football now 14 times in a row." So when you have a coach that's willing to do that and a QB who is struggling right now, I'd drop him because at this rate, it might be Desmond Ritter season.
Well, when you say you drop him, let me tell you some of the players that are on a lot of waiver wire. What a lot of waiver wires right now, and tell me if you would drop Marcus Mariota for him. So we got Ryan Tannehill versus the Commies,
Give me Ryan top of the hill.
Jacoby Brissett versus the Chargers,
Set.
Teddy Bridgewater versus the Jets,
Give me Teddy.
Cooper Rush, Kyler, feel free to weigh in on this one versus the Rams.
Give me Cooper
Um,
Rush.
Cooper Rush is probably just going to perform better than Marcus Mariota. I'm scared for this game, but Marcus Mariota is just not doing anything.
Well, it sounds like everybody you guys would rather have than Marcus Mariota. Let me go really far down here. Baker Mayfield versus the 49ers. Let's say you're in a super flex league. Who are you going to start of those two?
I would go Baker.
Give me
He can
Baker.
he's proved himself before. He has bad games, but every once in a while he has just an absurd game. And Marcus Mariota has had one of games and mostly just really bad.
Well, sounds like Marcus Mariota is completely dead to you guys, especially should be dead in one QB leagues. Super tough schedule coming up. Tampa Bay, 49ers, Bengals. That is not a bunch of teams you want to be playing. But moving on, we're done with the matchups of the week. We're going on to our next segment.
Bums of the week.
Starting us off with the bums of the week is my bum of the week selection, George Kittle, or should I say George Little, 4.4 points. 49ers in a game that win 24-9 versus the Rams, and the Rams completely able to shut out that run game for a lot of teams. Guys, why wasn't George Kittle more involved? I'm looking at this guy, and he's an absolute beast when he has the ball in his hand. He has that connection with Jimmy Garoppolo already. We don't get the Trey Lance excuse anymore. He is healthy, and he should be putting up elite numbers, but 4.4 is not what we're wanting to see. Kyler, tell me about George Kittle.
He's a great tight end. He can run block. He can catch. Sorry, catch passes, and he can run after the catch. So honestly, I don't see why he's not performing well. If it's just the play call is not going his way, or if it's defense is finally like realizing how good he is and double covering him, or putting instead of just a linebacker an actual corner. So I don't know why he's not performing where he should be. He's not this caliber of tight end, and he should be way higher.
Yeah, I think the joke right now is that he plays left tackle instead of tight end. But Josh, is George Kittle someone we expect to have a bounce back, or is he maybe he's only in the QB8 range?
I'd say he does have a bounce back eventually, just because the Rams they still do have a very good pass rush, so that explains why he basically had to play left tackle last week. As long as the pass rush isn't as good as the Rams, which like 2 or 3 teams can claim that they're near that level, he should be fine. Um, that one was just an unfortunate game because again, the Rams have one of the best pass rushers. They do have Aaron Donald on that line, so you do need to help the line a little bit on that one.
Well, if you're looking to build depth, and you might consider trading him away, I'll move on next to Jonathan Lamer, there from the Indianapolis Colts, and has already been designated for out for this next week. 3.3 points. This guy has not been performing what fantasy managers wanted from the QB1 pick, and you can't even blame it to injury, as this was the first game that he was injured. What are we expecting from Jonathan Taylor? Kyler, I'm going to throw this one. Sorry, this one's Josh's. Jonathan Lamer. Josh, tell me about him.
Right now, granted he does have the injury, so I'll give him some credit that might have played a little bit to why he did as bad as he did, but Generally speaking, I am avoiding the Colts offense at this point. I recently traded away Michael Pittman just because, again, I didn't want a part of this offense. He had over 20 attempts and he only got like 42 yards. For a running back that you drafted one or two, depending on the league, can't have that. He needs to perform. 10 points for him should be a bad week. He is with three, and he's done this multiple weeks now. He's a RB 20, I believe. And he was only carried by 1 week, so you have to start him if he's healthy, sadly, just because where he did take him. But I would not be happy about it.
Yeah, Jonathan Taylor, owners in situations just like ours in our league. Jaden's in dead last right now, 1-3. I imagine he then also has the lowest points scored so far. I think you got to be trading this guy because you cannot wait on that upside anymore. Now, you shouldn't be going out trading him for pennies, but you got to be able to build some depth and get the points back because Jonathan Taylor was a huge commitment in the 101, which means that you are waiting so many picks to get him to get to your next one in the second round and then start of the third round that you definitely took a bit of a tank there just to get a guy like that, and he has not been it. So definitely, if you ask me, someone you could consider trading away, but do not trade him for pennies, as you need to start fielding some offers for this guy and compare. Last one I'll throw to here, Kyler, Jalen Waddle or Jalen Stumble, more like it, 5.9 points. Talk to me about him.
Said Jalen Stumble, because this is no indication of the type of wide receiver he is. Unfortunately, his quarterback went down. Blame the NFL, blame whoever, but he's a good wide receiver. Unfortunately, his connection with his quarterback is just gone. I Once he comes back, I can still see him being good, but just this week, no indication of what the type of wide receiver he is.
Yeah, 2 catches for 39 yards. Teddy Bridgewater was the backup there, and I think that is very good for him because we watched what Teddy Bridgewater was able to put up with DJ Moore on the Panthers offense. I hate to say it in his first year, but I think the Dolphins head coach is a lot better than the Panthers. Are you worried at all about what Jalen Waddle's going to be with Teddy Bridgewater? Let's say Tua is out for the rest of the season let's hope not, but maybe he is. Should we be worried about Jalen Waddle? Does his production ceiling really move down that far, or is he more of a scheme player?
I think his production will go down a bit. Uh, Tua doesn't have that arm strength, but Jalen Waddle is able to catch short passes and still make a move and get into the open. Has the best touchdown celebration, and unfortunately, we weren't able to really see that. And I don't think we're going to see those celebrations for a while.
All right. Well, then that concludes it for our bums of the week. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next segment.
Waiver Weapons.
Just a reminder for those who are new, the waiver weapons are players that are on our waivers right now that anyone in our league could go pick up and start. But the reason we select it like that is that it gives fantasy managers everywhere who are in these deeper leagues, and we start I think 9 players, and then we have 6-person benches with an IR spot. So you're looking at these waivers, and someone might say, oh, just go start Nyheim Hines. Well, Nyheim Hines isn't going to be in your deeper leagues, and that's where you're really needing the most help. So we wanted to throw out a couple options here. Last week, Robert Tonyan was a hit. Geno Smith was the QB2 on the week. Super hit there. Unfortunately, Daniel Bellinger was a miss. I think so far all of our waiver weapons from our guests have been misses. I'll have to go back and check the tape on that. So let's hope that our special guest here, Mr. Accountable, is able to turn that around. But I'll start it off with Rachaad White is my waiver weapon selection of the week. Yes, he had the fumble on the special teams. I really do think it got in his head, but what this guy was able to put up in a floor of being the receiving back for the team and actually starting to step up into that role is something that is super exciting to anyone who has had a Patriots or Leonard Fournette running back on their team because Tom Brady checks it down because he wants to find the guy that's open and get him a ton of yards. And Rashad White is definitely a better receiving back than Leonard Fournette. And I think he can do that for the team. So my waiver weapon of the week is Rashad White. I'll throw to you, Josh, next. Devontae Parker.
Yeah, so I chose Devontae Parker. I do realize that the Patriots are down to I don't even know what string QB they're at this point, third string, fourth string, something like that. However, they are going up against the worst defense in the league, the Detroit Lions. So if they're going to try to keep up in this game, they're going to have to throw, and he is one of the bigger targets that they have there in New England. So he might have one of those weeks again where he goes off. Simple as that.
Yeah, Jacoby Myers was out both the last 2 weeks, and Devontae Parker had a huge step up because of that. If Jacoby Myers start, is Devontae Parker someone you're still targeting?
Wouldn't target him as highly, but at least in the case of this week, yes, it'd be a lot more of a streaming option instead.
All right, and then our last waiver weapon selection of the week. Kyler, talk to us about Randall Cobb.
First of all, it's Randall corn on the cob because it's corn, the most beautiful thing. Um, I I'm choosing the old man. He's a great wide receiver. He's done well wherever he's gone, and he's back with Aaron Rodgers. Yes, they're going against the New York Giants. They're ranked number one versus wide receivers. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to finally hit his full stride and look for other targets than just Alan Lazard. And I think after Alan Lazard, he'll go with his old faithful of Randall Cobb. Giants will probably focus their number one wide receiver up room for Randall Cobb to run slants in the slot and just pick up small yardage, but also just it adds up.
Yeah, Randall Cobb, 32 years young. I think that he does still have a target floor for this team. And so when you're looking for somebody that you're like, okay, I just need you to not bust on me. Wow. Randall Cobb can be that. Last thing I wanted to throw in here for our final segment is the mailbag segment. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna cut out the bust on me. I'm gonna have to do some video editing. Damn it.
No,
That's not gonna stay. No.
it's perfect.
Nope, that's not sticking around. Let me see what time we're at in this recording, because I'm gonna have to cut that out. I don't even know where we're at in the recording.
Do you
Um,
want to do you want to like start over at the mailbag and
no,
like
no, no, not at all. I'm just gonna. We're just gonna start right here. So, our next segment is the mailbag. So, our first question here comes from our biggest fan, Billy. Cordero Patterson managers know that he is on IR. What are good options for replacing him while he is on there? Josh, I'll throw this one to you first.
So I'm looking currently at our waiver options for running backs, and that seems like a good option right now. But in actuality, Tavius Murray, he's not a bad option. He's going to be in a timeshare, maybe not this week, but next week or 2 weeks from now, he should be a good pickup. You'd have to get him now, unfortunately, more unlikely, but could be good. Rex Burkhead, he might get some touches because for whatever reason, Houston really likes Rex Burkhead, so he should get some touches. Or you can take a chance on someone like Rashad White, Jerick McKinnon. Um, yeah, no, that's really about it at this point. Maybe take a chance on Michael Carter if all those options are already gone. If Michael Carter is on waivers.
Yeah, I do actually want to call out your decision there. Rex Burkhead, Damian Pierce had 100% of the rushing share last year. 100% of the rushing snaps. Damian Pierce was the guy. I don't think you can trust Rex Burkhead at all until that guy is injured. But I did want to talk about the two backups to Cordell Patterson in the running back spot specifically. Damian Williams and Tyler Algier are both guys that are in that running back backfield. Kyler, are either of those guys people that you would want to trust to fill in that spot for you on the roster?
Honestly, I'm looking at Billy's team right now, and you said Damian Pierce. He has Damian Pierce on the bench, and they're going against Jacksonville, ranked number 26 in the run. I would just start Damian Pierce. As for your Falcons question, I wouldn't trust them too much. I think they struggle without him. So it's kind of one that you either have to find somebody else or play someone that's already on your bench, like Damian Pierce.
All right, well, that brings us to our next question here. Will Tyreek Hill struggle to reel in points now that Tua is out for week 5 and maybe even longer? This comes from Bandon. We did talk about how Jalen Waddle will likely see that drop in production, but I think we can say that Tyreek Hill is a bigger part of the offense. I I do worry partially about what Tyreek Hill's ceiling can look like with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback, but if for whatever reason Skylar Thompson came in, I think that connection would just be too elite. The third string quarterback, future Hall of Famer Skylar Thompson, will, if he ever gets a chance, would absolutely dominate with Tyreek Hill. But in reality, Tyreek Hill is really good at taking the slant and just bursting past a couple people and really taking it on. I do think he's just going to get a ton of short passes that he's going to be expected to get yards after the catch. And I think that's just something that Tyreek Hill can absolutely dominate with. Josh, tell me about how Skylar Thompson will fix the Dolphins' woes. Josh, you there? Kyler, you want to take this one instead? Josh, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Did I cut out there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I guess it stopped working there for a second, for whatever reason. Yeah, no. Teddy Bridgewater, he's the old man. He's kind of broken at this point. He's more of an Alex Smith, check it down kind of guy. It's Skylar Thompson came there. Big arm, pretty good accuracy. Able to get a few bombs down to Tyreek, but reality is we are in Teddy season. Tyreek should still be good. He still does have that upside of potentially going 75 yards on a short slant. While his ceiling, I wouldn't say is nearly as high, his floor is still roughly the same. So I wouldn't be too worried unless you're looking for one of those Tyreek gets 40 plus points type of weeks.
Yeah, Kyler, anything else to add on the Dolphins wide receiver situation now?
No, honestly, I'm going to be a parakeet and just echo back whatever you guys said because I think his floor is still really high. His ceiling is where you're going to really be worried because he can either just absolutely go off or he's just going to be another average game, maybe 14 points. So it just depends on how they play him, how the quarterback's feeling, and who they're playing. I don't even know who they're playing, but I I still say he's going to be a great wide receiver.
All right, well, that moves us on to our last mailbag question here. Is Goff a set and forget it QB for rest of schedule? And I'm not sure if you guys knew this, but the Lions right now have the number 1 scoring offense in the NFL. Jared Goff has the most touchdowns in the NFL, passing touchdowns in the NFL, and is third in passing yards. Their defense at the same time is the 32nd ranked defense. And when I look at what happened with Patrick Mahomes and to give him that huge season that just absolutely dominated the league, it was a horrible defense and an offense that was just built to his skills. I am kind of seeing that for Jared Goff. And if I was an owner of him, I'd be pretty excited. I'm really liking what I'm seeing from him talent wise. I do think that he's not an elite level quarterback, but I'm liking his situation a lot more than these other quarterbacks. And I'd say that, yes, he is someone that you can set and forget at the quarterback position for the rest of the schedule. Now, their quarterback matchups have been very easy for the so far this year. Playing the Seahawks this week was definitely a big indication of the fact that the Lions really are going to feast on those bad defenses, and they're going to be playing some good ones in the future. But the Lions finished fourth last year. It's not like they're going to be having the most insane rest of season matchup. I mean, I'm looking at their future schedule right here, and of course, the Packers are going to be tough for them, but they play the Bills and they play the Cowboys. Those are arguably their two other tough matchups. But then I'm looking at just straight average against the quarterback teams like the Giants and the Bears, Jacksonville. I'm feeling good about Jared Goff. How are you guys feeling about him?
I think rest of the season he's fine. Kind of like what you mentioned, he does have a horrible defense, so worst comes to worst, he'll get you a lot of garbage time points, which luckily in fantasy do still count as regular points. So unless he gets hurt or until he just starts to pull Jared Goff from a few years ago, I wouldn't worry. I'd start him for the.
Yeah, how about you, Kyler?
So I'd start him, and I'd kind of leave it. You might change him out every once in a while. But as a Cowboys fan, I got to see our number one offense. It is because we were always playing from behind. We were always just throwing it down the field, just trying to catch up. So I feel like the Lions are always either just trying to catch up or trying to put up points in like the last 8 minutes of a game, and that's where you're going to get those garbage time. And you're still going to see the number one offense, but you're also with that number 32 defense. Teams are going to put up points against them really quickly. They're going to lay back. They're going to give you some deep coverages where you can go down checkoffs and just get easy points.
Well, I think that about does it for the mailbag section. I do have one final thing here. I wanted to get your guys' opinions. We're going to rank Dr. Pepper, Coca Cola, Pepsi, and I want to know just of those three signature drinks from those. What do you guys think? How are you ranking them? Kyler, I'm throwing to you first as the guest. Give me your one, two, and three here.
You have them in perfect order right there, left to right. You got Dr. Pepper, just absolutely fabulous. Just gives you that spice. It gives you that flavor. It gives you that little 1-2 punch. And then you got Coca-Cola, an absolute classic. Coming around Christmas time, I always think of like the polar bear, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, which every other restaurant offers because they can't afford Coca-Cola. Um, but you have the perfect order right there.
Josh, I'll throw it to you next. I'm sorry your Mountain Dew isn't on here, but these three, how are you ranking them?
I mean, obviously Mountain Dew would be one. However, you were a bit mean in this case and not giving me that option. Um, Dr. Pepper would be my one out of those three. And I'll be a little bit different from Kyler and go Pepsi than Coca-Cola. Um, they're about the same to me. Typically, just like Pepsi, just slightly more, but they're more or less the same too.
You
Yeah,
better take the bag.
I'm not a big soda drinker at all, and I think Pepsi's kind of like the bottom of that. It's just so sweet, and it's just really a huge assault on your taste buds with how sweet it is. I think it's for me, it's Coke, Dr Pepper, Pepsi. I do sometimes love a Dr Pepper, but I think I just like Coke because it's good with whiskey. So that about does it for our episode of the Fall Start Fantasy Podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. You can find me on Twitter at Cameron's Ego, and you can find Josh at Josh Newshafer. Hit us up with mailbag questions there, or if you think any of our takes were dumb, if you think all of our takes were amazing, which of course they were, and of course we're going to go 3 for 3 with the waiver weapons this week. Kyler, do you have a Twitter handle? Would you be the first person with a Twitter handle of our guests?
I have to legit look it up. I do not know.
He does not have a Twitter handle. So just like everyone else, you're going to have to find Kyler in person and physically shake him down. He's a big boy, so bring some friends and physically shake him down for your fantasy football questions. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to add before we close out?
Go Chiefs.
I found the Twitter handle, Kyler Nicholas, so KYLERNICHOLAS.
All right. I'll make sure to link that in the YouTube description. Absolutely go check us out on YouTube. A subscribe helps so much. A like goes ahead and puts us onto more people's suggested feeds, so please do that. And I think that about does it. We will be back next week before week 6 begins, so be on the lookout for our next episode so you can be ready before the ball is snapped. Thank you, and goodbye.